Hey guys, alright, we are back with some history matters. This time, 10-minute history. Well, I guess we're continuing off where we left off last time. 10-minute history, the late British Empire, short documentary. I see that they have their holdings in Germany on this map. That's pretty neat. Now, I must say that this is a video that is 9 minutes and 59 seconds long. This isn't 10 minutes. I've been lied to already. No, I'm just messing. All right, let's go ahead and just dive right into the video.
1783, and the Americans have left. The empire, led by King George III, famous for being crazy, now had to find a new place for a penal colony, and it found one in Australia. So both Australia and New Zealand had been known to Europeans for centuries because of past Dutch explorers. It was Captain James Cook who sailed to both and claimed them for Britain. New South Wales was chosen as Britain's new penal colony, and the first convicts arrived in 1788. So in the next year, the French Revolution happened, paving the way for the Napoleonic Wars, which were a British victory. Victory here gave Britain a few new colonies.
Oh my god, we're just skipping over the Napoleonic era that fast? Holy shit.
Such as Malta and South Africa. Importantly, it also weakened Britain's great imperial rival, meaning it could increase the size of its empire without much resistance. Which it did.
Yes, it did. The size of the Royal Navy was what ensured Britain's dominance during the period. For example, in 1864, the British had over 4 times as many screw steamer warships as France, who had the second largest navy, 357 versus 81. Yes, Pax Britannica.
Following the Napoleonic War,
we're number one.
This is known as the Pax Britannica, the British peace, in which Britain was the world's sole superpower. Over the next few decades, Britain, which Ireland had formerly been incorporated into, seized Guyana, Singapore, Assam, and this territory in India. Britain was helped in these...
Founded in 1600 by Queen Elizabeth I, was independent, barring some government oversight, operated its own military. Yes, the East India Company was pretty much its own fucking country. But yeah, it was very powerful, very wealthy too.
Ventures by the East India Company, who oversaw Britain's trade with China, mostly in opium. China had previously banned
things banned: opium, Mongols, and British gunships. 2 of those things are about to not be banned because they're going to force themselves in.
Opium, but Britain refused to listen and kept importing it anyway because money. In
Yeah. And they fought, what, 3 opium wars?
In 1839, the Imperial Chinese government seized opium from British ships and destroyed it, which led to armed conflict, which Britain won, gaining lots of money, a continuation of opium selling in Hong Kong. Britain's victory here also gave it huge influence over China's economy, bringing it into what is known as the Informal Empire. The Informal Empire consisted of places which weren't directly under British...
I've never heard of the term Informal Empire. Or have I, and I've just forgotten it or ignored it? I mean, if we're talking informal empire, I don't think it would, obviously wouldn't cover all of China, but the spheres of influence inside of China. But also, yeah, I would agree with the statement on India, those parts of India being part of the informal empire at this time. But not like the Chinese government as a whole. Spheres of areas inside China, yeah. I don't know though. Because this is not my time period.
Control, but due to military and diplomatic pressure, were often coerced into acting in Britain's interests. To the northwest of India, Britain turned its eyes to Afghanistan.
Okay, yes, so this is what I would agree with on the map, with the pink being informal empire. This is something I definitely agree with. That's for sure.
On the surface, this was for trade, but the major reason was Russia. Britain was afraid that Russia would seize either Afghanistan or Persia, from which it could then invade India. Britain was also worried that Afghanistan would make an alliance with Russia and so invaded. This was a complete disaster and amounted to nothing more than a slaughter of British and Indian troops by the Afghan militias. This competition for influence between Britain and Russia is known as the Great Games.
It's like Risk, except people died. You're not playing Risk right. No one's dying. I've got 5 bodies in my basement. All from Risk. Actually, no. 4 from Risk, 1 from Monopoly. Yeah, that's right. Risk is deadlier than Monopoly. I said it.
Spread beyond Asia and into Europe. The Russians were increasing their influence in the Balkans, and Britain was worried about Russian dominance there as well. In order to curb Russia, Britain, France, and the Ottoman Empire began the Crimean War, which was a victory for the Allies and slowed the growing Russian power. In North America, Canada was established as a province, and the borders between itself and the US were finalised. Canada later gained autonomy by becoming a dominion, which meant that the colony was self-governing, but foreign policy was left to Britain. Also about this time, the British began to settle New Zealand. At first, the Maori.
The Maori were the natives of New Zealand, and one way they resisted British expansion was to create a monarch. This monarch was elected, often from only a few tribes, and would negotiate with the British. Oh, that's a way to adapt to colonialism. I like it.
The natives of New Zealand were fine with the Europeans as they brought trade to them, but eventually it dawned on them that the Europeans weren't going to stop coming. This led to war, which the British won, leading to more European settlement. In contrast to populating New Zealand, Ireland faced one of the greatest depopulations in human history thanks to the potato.
The Irish potato famine was caused by a disease which killed the potato plants. Since the Irish were reliant on potatoes for food, this severely reduced the amount of food to go around. Ireland's population halved due to starvation and emigration, mostly to the United States. Yes. But also, I think the reason, what this is not discussing, because obviously this is very in brief, I think because of the landscape of much of Ireland is why the potato was such a food that they were pretty much dependent upon at this time, because of technology available at the time for growing food, and of course globalism not as being widespread, and of course, you know, just general production during this time period, right? There would be an agricultural revolution, I think in the 50s is when that occurred, where now we can produce food at a level that is honestly fucking insane. But the Irish potato famine, it is understandable as to, I personally view it as understandable why they were so reliant, because of the terrain of Ireland is not the best for growing crops, or at least growing crops to sustain a super large population. And then, of course, if you just use one type of plant and one disease, you get unlucky and you get a disease, that's going to ruin the entire country, right? But I think it's because the potato can grow pretty easily. Like, it's not a hard plant to grow, I don't think. I think it can grow almost anywhere or some shit, right? I don't know, it's weird. I don't understand farming. I just know, I know there's a specific reason why they focused on the potato, and I think it has to do with the terrain, general terrain of Ireland. Anyways.
Famine which decimated potato harvests. The British forced the Irish to grow cash crops, which meant that there was less space to grow food there.
Oh, that explains it.
The Irish grew potatoes since they had such a high caloric yield for the space they took.
Aha! I was right. It was based on the terrain. It was on calories.
Took up. When the famine struck, it was made worse by the British government.
I was just wrong, but I was right in a sense. I was wrong, but also right.
Who ordered that food would still be exported from Ireland to Britain and that aid would be limited. Ireland's population dropped by half and still has yet to recover to its pre-1800 level.
Yes.
All the way back in India, Britain, specifically the independent East India...
Oh boy. The Sepoy Rebellion. You guys know I've talked about this before. Actually, you may not know because a lot of you are new. And I don't think I've talked about the Sepoy Rebellion in a long time, actually. Huh. Yeah. I have a video where I talk a little bit, I think more in depth on this Sepoy Rebellion. It's a Simple History did a video on it. And I reacted to that. And that was back when I knew more about the rebellion, because I literally had just finished a book about the Sepoy Rebellion. So, should search on my channel and go find it.
India Company was having some trouble. So background. The East India Company's military was mostly staffed by Sepoys, who were Indian troops who served under British officers. These Sepoys became increasingly unhappy as their treatment worsened. Their pay stagnated, and they were also forced to fight abroad despite British promises that they wouldn't have to. British policy...
At first, the British did not intervene in matters of Indian religion or the social order. The British later banned the practice of sati, whereby a wife would throw herself onto her husband's funeral pile. The British also banned polygamy, child marriage, and outlawed slavery in the 19th century.
India had also led to massive changes in its society as well, which upset many of those living there. For
For
example, the British levied heavy taxes and did nothing to protect the Indian textile industry. The British were also arbitrarily grabbing more and more territory, which understandably made some Indian rulers nervous. Furthermore, the British were also keen proselytizers, and many Hindus and Muslims felt that the British wanted to convert all of India to Christianity.
Yes, okay. But this is kind of, I think, a little bit over exaggerated a little bit. Of course, the British, but by this time, especially by the time of 1857, the idea of mass conversion, I don't think was necessarily a thing in colonialists' minds. At least it was not for the British. I don't think the British cared too much. I think they just wanted to control the populace and make money, especially the East India Company. But of course, to the Sepoys and to the natives of the subcontinent of India, they had the feeling, though, that the British were forcing upon them their Christian beliefs and whatnot, which, and to a certain extent, yes, they were. They certainly were. But I wouldn't say any of it was like what we see like the Spanish do in America, right? That's what I look towards as a nation forcing religion upon another, is the Americas, North and South America, the Caribbean and whatnot. I feel like you don't really see that as much with the British in India. You certainly see it to an extent, but not like, it's completely different. But to the Sepoys, and the Sepoys and all those that would become part of the 1857 rebellion, they felt like they were, being forced and whatnot, or that their culture was being wiped out. And another thing that the British would do, or there was this rumor that was spread, is that, so when you have the type of weapons that they use, there's for matchlocks and whatnot, there's, like, you have gunpowder and stuff, and there's this thing that you're supposed to lick for your weapon to work right or something. And there were rumors being spread that the British were mass just producing like animal fat ones, and they weren't doing anything and they weren't telling the Sepoys or whatever that there was animal fat in there, which of course goes against their religion and their culture. And that was one of the reasons that sparks this massive rebellion. And essentially what this rebellion boils down to is, it boils down to just confusion and miscommunication is essentially what happened here, from my understanding, from how I look at this war, this rebellion. So back to the video.
None of this endeared the British to the Indians, and in 1857 the Sepoys revolted against the East India Company. One Sepoy, called Mangal Pandey, mutinied against the British by assaulting some officers, and his execution made him a martyr. The earlier British defeat in Afghanistan also gave confidence to the Indians, since it meant that the British could be defeated. The actual...
Yes, he is mentioning. Musket cartridges were made from paper and contained gunpowder and a shot for loading a musket. In order to load the rifle, a Sepoy would have to bite down open the cartridge, pour the gunpowder down the barrel, and then ram the paper-covered shot down the barrel. Okay, so he doesn't have to lick it, he has to bite it. The grease, often animal fat or beeswax, was used as lubricant that made loading easier.
The rebellion began when Indian troops were issued with ammunition coated in either pig or beef fat, which offended both the Muslim and Hindu.
And here's where, this is what I was talking about, miscommunication. I don't think this was done on purpose. And the book that I read, or at least from what I remember it, because I could be wrong. Remember, I could be wrong in this because it's been a year since I read this book. So, remember that. I don't think it was purposely done, or it was a rumor that was being spread. Or both. Could have been both.
Hindu Sepoys. When they refused to use the ammunition, the British arrested them and they, alongside others, mutinied. The rebelling Sepoys seized some cities, including Delhi, but eventually the British were able to defeat them. The reasons for this were that only a few Indian states actually joined the rebellion. Many were neutral and support for the British remained strong. One reason for this was that the concept of being Indian didn't really exist.
Yes.
India is an exceptionally diverse place, and a Muslim from Bengal or a Sikh from Punjab had little in common with a Hindu from Delhi. Another reason for the rebellion's failure was that it was not a pre-planned, politically backed uprising, and the British had much better organisation. The cost incurred in money, prestige and lives led the British Crown to take control of the running of India, and the East India Company was dissolved in 1858 and Queen Victoria was proclaimed the Empress of India. The British also gained more land from the Indians, removing disloyal chiefs called Nawabs from power. Britain's dominance over its colonies was secured by increasing technological advancements brought about by the Industrial Revolution. Some of the most important of these advancements were the steam-powered ship, trains, the telegram and more advanced firearms. This dominance wouldn't last forever, and towards the end of the century Britain found itself with new rivals. These were the United States, which was recovering from its civil war, the newly unified German Empire, and a rising Japan, which was looking to carve up Asia. The new German Empire wanted colonies of its own, and so turned to Africa. This worried the British, and in order to soothe tensions, the Berlin Conference was called to divide up Africa in a way that avoided war. So Africa went from looking like this to this, with Britain and France getting the lion's share. So the British public's response to imperialism was mixed. Outright opposition to colonialism was very rare. Most people's attitude sat between apathy and a deep pride in Britain's role as a colonial power. This was primarily due to the belief that Britain was a civilizing force. So Britain's conquest of Africa was not a simple and straightforward affair. Britain had substantial military advantages over the Africans it was conquering, such as rifles, machine guns and gunboats. Yet many Africans were able to win victories against the British, such as the Zulus, who slaughtered the...
The Zulu kingdom resided in southern Africa and bordered British territory. The Zulus would often forsake firearms for more traditional weapons such as spears and cowhide shields. Ultimately, British technological superiority forced the Zulus to capitulate in just 3 months.
British at the Battle of Isandlwana. On the same day, the British won one of its best-known battles, the Battle of Rorke's Drift. Another group of Africans, the Boers, who...
Oh, the Boer War, oh boy. During the First Boer War, they managed to defeat the British and maintain their independence. This was because, unlike the Zulus, the Boers were very proficient with firearms. The Boers lived in 2 nations, the Free Orange State and the Republic of Transvaal.
Who were originally Dutch settlers, also resisted British expansion in South Africa. In order to defeat Boer guerrilla warfare by denying them shelter, the British placed many women and children into concentration camps where they faced horrible conditions. The conquest of Africa was short and was...
I forgot about the concentration camps for the Boers.
Pretty much complete after 30 years, with only Ethiopia and Liberia remaining independent. The southern colonies in Africa were unified into South Africa, which alongside Australia and New Zealand became a dominion, just like Canada. The empire grew to its territorial height after the First World War, where Britain gained sizable Ottoman and German territory. It wasn't all gains for Britain though, as throughout the war Britain's hold on Ireland became untenable and Ireland became an independent republic in 19...
I'm learning about that. Oh, I'm learning about that right now in one of my classes.
1922. From the crumbling Ottoman Empire, the British gained Palestine, which it was decided would become a home for the world's Jewish people.
But it really wouldn't, not until after World War II.
Thousands of Jews arrived in Palestine over the next couple of decades, and their increasing...
Oh boy. The Balfour Declaration of 1917 was a declaration by the British government that it would support the creation of a Jewish state in Palestine. The declaration angered the Arabs in the region, who Britain had convinced to rebel against the Ottoman Empire since they believed Palestine would be theirs. Yes, the British had promised the Arabs that they would give them like an Arabic state, and then they did not do that.
Numbers and political powers there caused several revolts against the British, all of which were suppressed. After the Second World War, many more arrived and the tensions rose again, culminating in a civil war and the creation of Israel. So, the Second World War was a British victory, but had brought Britain to the brink of economic ruin. Indians had been seeking independence from Britain since about 5 minutes after it turned up.
Yeah, it sounds about right.
Many Indians felt that their contribution to both world wars meant that they were owed independence. In 1937, India...
Oh, this is so much reading this time. The Indian National Congress, led by Jawaharlal Nehru, they were advocates for Indian independence and were strongly opposed to India's participation in World War II. Their main opponents were the Muslim League, which won many seats but did not win any regions. By the way, the movie Gandhi is a good movie. I think I've watched it twice.
Elections in which the Indian National Congress, an advocate for independence, won the largest share of the seats. Furthermore...
Oh, the Bengal famine. The famine was caused by the Japanese seizure of Burma, which was a breadbasket for India. This caused a food shortage which the British refused to alleviate. Instead of sending food to Bengal, regional governors prevented food from being exported. The famine was made much worse when grain from Australia was redirected to Egypt. Huh. Okay, so... Now, this doesn't sound like a British issue, but it sounds more like a regional governor's issue. which of course the regional governors, I think at this time pretty much would be Brits. They'd be like Irish, Scottish, English, whatever. Yeah, I don't know too much about the famine, so I'm not going to talk on it.
Or the famine of 1943, which was caused mostly by Britain diverting food away from India, had cost the lives of many millions, increasing demands for the end of British rule. The most famous opponents to the British were Mohandas Gandhi and Muhammad Ali Jinnah. Gandhi was not a politician, but was very important since he practiced a non-violent approach. Jinnah is famous for advocating that India
Muslim state, please. Pakistan
be divided so that Muslims could have their own state as well. In 1947, India gained its independence and was subsequently divided into India and Pakistan.
With a lot of violence.
Britain was unable to fight this tide due to its weakness. It simply couldn't afford to force India to stay. Furthermore, Clement Attlee, Britain's post-war Prime Minister, was sympathetic to the Indian cause. The division of India was not so peaceful, though, and it is believed that during the mass migration, ethnic cleansing and fighting that occurred afterwards, as many as 2 million people died.
Woo!
In the aftermath of World War II, Britain found itself opposed by two anti-imperialist superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union. Slowly but...
I wouldn't really say the USA was necessarily anti-imperialist. I mean, they were certainly anti-imperialist because the communists were putting themselves on the form of anti-imperialism. But, the United States, still wants to have influence in various regions. And it would be neo-imperialism.
But surely, over the course of the 20th century, colonies broke away from British rule, some violently, some peacefully. A notable example of British imperial retreat is Kenya. Kenya had...
Tens of thousands of Indians settled in Kenya and formed a second tier of citizen. Many were employed as laborers of a household staff. They were permitted to settle on better land than most Kenyans.
And run similarly to most other colonies, with white settlers owning lots of land, amassing wealth, and forcing horrible working conditions on the natives.
Sounds
Many
about
Kenyans,
like
notably
imperialism.
Jomo Kenyatta, attempted to get reforms from the British, all of which were refused. Some Kenyans then turned to violence, and what is known as the Mau Mau uprising began. The Mau Mau resorted to guerrilla warfare, but the British were able to suppress the uprising after capturing its leaders. Both sides committed horrendous war crimes, including torture and the murder of women and children. In 1960, Britain announced that it would move towards an independent Kenya, and in 1963, Kenya gained its independence with Kenyatta as its first president. Britain's motives for this were simple. The writing was on the wall and the empire was going to end. Harold Macmillan, the Prime Minister of Britain, made sure that the handover of power was swift to help promote...
The Commonwealth of Nations was formed to help mend relations and improve economic ties with Britain's former colonies. It was hoped that close ties with the Commonwealth would improve Britain's international authority. Some, such as Ireland, refused to join.
Relations between Britain and its former colonies.
The Commonwealth is certainly not a bad idea on the side of the British. It's kind of like what the United States is doing with neo-imperialism.
Decolonization would continue for the next several decades until Britain's last major colony, Hong Kong, was handed back to China in 1997, thus marking the end of the empire. So in conclusion, the legacy of the British Empire is undeniable. One only needs to look at a map of countries that drive on the left, play cricket or rugby, or still have the British monarch.
You mean drive on the wrong side of the road?
As their head of state. Opinions on the empire range from it being a civilizing force to an oppressive one. What can be said for definite is that without the empire, the world would have looked very different today.
Yeah.
I hope you enjoyed this episode and thank you for watching.
This was a damn good episode. And it also had stuff that I could actually commentate on for once. I actually felt like I knew stuff. I was able to add some good stuff here. At least I feel like I was. So yeah, that was 10-Minute History, the Late British Empire short documentary by History Matters. I hope you guys enjoyed. Remember to hit that like button and subscribe for more. Leave a suggestion down below for what you want to see me react to next. And I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.